we're here to talk today, me and Goz, about some Magyar history. So Goz is a researcher in Magyar history. He's learnt a lot from Attila Flink, and he knows about the glyphs at Carrion. That's how we met, and there's a lot of history in Australia that pertains to our origins as a humanity, and I think that's what we wanted to talk about, and in specific our language.
Yeah, because the Magyar language is the original language of nature itself, like where all the sounds come from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whether they're sort of, well, the sounds of nature, the organic sounds of nature that you hear
Yeah.
naturally, without any sort of contrivance. And this Magyar language was prevalent in all indigenous tribes of the world, in the sense of the actual language system itself is called an agglutinative language system, which is built upon all of these compound words, which are mainly sort of nouns and suffixes, and prefixes, as opposed to sort of the conjugation of English and what I call confused tongue languages, the Indo-European languages, that basically the modern languages that have all been derived from Magyar language, but they've just basically all been confused in the sense of the languages that we speak today, except for Magyar language, is not original. And there's still examples of Magyar language all around the world. Because the thing is that you've got Magyar language in the Bible. Aramaic is a Babylonian dialect of Magyar language. Hebrew comes after it, and other forms and languages and things like that. And you find in all the Americas, they're all speaking some dialect or communalect of the Magyar language, from the Indians to the Ecuadorians to the Toltecs, the Incas, and basically also down to South America and Middle America and stuff. And it's like even today, in a lot of these Latin American countries, you hear they've been colonised with either Spanish or Portuguese.
Yeah.
But then they still do have some of the traditional dialects left. And the thing is that what I'm talking about with dialects is that it's the same language, it's just that some letters have been changed due to geography, due to political climate, depending on the consciousness of the society they live in, whether they're under a slave rulership or not.
Yeah.
And basically speaking, I'll give you an example of there's interchanging letters in words like L, Y and R, H, T and M, B and V. You find in a lot of Asian languages this is the case too.
Yeah.
Like B and V and L and R, are all interchangeable sounds, and also the actual writing. And the thing is that the Magyar language has basically survived through so many different forms of language being changed, all the way from symbol characters and runic scripts, all the way to modern Romanised alphabetic numeric systems. And the Magyar language, the oldest form of it was found here in Australia, but Australia's been colonised the same as Hungary. And so it's hard to find any of this truth left whatsoever. And I studied a lot of this stuff off this man named Attila Flink, who spent over 65 years studying this through his own experience, where basically when he came here after World War II in about 1949. In 1950 he was working on Warragamba Dam as labour there building the dam, and he was on a smoko break with other Hungarian workers and he'd only just come here and wasn't speaking much English still, and after a while these two tribal men that were listening to them speak, that were sitting in the bush, came up to them and said, "What language are you speaking there? You're not speaking our tribal language, but you're speaking the same language as one of the oldest Australian tribes."
Yeah. Wow.
Sort of in Australia, that's up Kempsey Way. There's about 30 of them left, and that was in 1950. So that was pretty amazing that, you know, he basically got told by, you know, a tribalman that basically your language that you're speaking is the same as certain dialects here. Because most of the dialects here, they say there was like over 600 dialects. Or they say over 600 different languages, but it's over 600 different dialects and communilects. Some are different languages, like the Hebrew type, or languages and sort of Indian type, sort of tribal languages. But the thing is that have drifted down here. But the thing is that they all have this same agglutinative language system where once you know this, it's so easy to translate this stuff. But if you don't know it, well, you can make a butchery of it. And that's what's happened in a lot of the languages that has been translated in the indigenous languages of the world has been all butchered because, say, for instance, to try and translate spoken tribal languages in Australia into English, well, English language itself has only 26 sounds, so it doesn't, the language itself is not phonetically strong enough to be able to sort of reproduce how the language actually sounds, where Magyar language has got 38 letters plus.
Okay, yeah.
So that's the big problem, and no one knew this for the whole of the colonisation except for some of the top bigwigs of, you know, the people that control sort of politics and military and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing about that. So we've got a whole alternative history, which is like, there's so many tons of examples, like, you know, in geography that's still here in Australia that you can find out once you know how the Hungarian language works, as in the Magyar language. See, Hungarian is just like the root language of this particular language, but Hungarian is sort of like a modern anglicised name for people that live in that area in the Carpathian Basin in Europe, that they call Hungary now, and it's been eroded back for the last 500-600 years from being 60% of Europe, and they don't even tell that properly in history books either. And so, yeah, and Australia is the Garden of Eden, so to speak. I shouldn't say Eden because Eden means Jews, and nothing wrong in that, but the thing is, it all didn't start with Judaism. It started with Magyar, and the whole sort of Yiddish sort of hijacked sort of Jewish concept of hijacked Magyar, where they basically take the original Magyar history and identity hijack it for themselves and then pervert it and twist it to their own sort of whims. Yeah, so it's very important we know all this stuff about this particular language. And yeah, this is the language that everyone used to speak before the Bible story of the confusion of the tongues. Now, whether that story of the confusion of the tongues is exactly true, but is another matter, because it took them a long time to confuse the tongues. The language is something that you can only wipe out, you know, gradually and change. And forge into something else.
Mhm. So it's the base language of all languages, basically.
Yeah, like even the Sumerian symbol characters are exactly the same as Hungarian symbol characters runic script,
Mm.
except for two symbols,
Okay.
and no other language comes close.
So
And this is what they do, but they don't promote it. Like, you have a look in the like sort of what's on YouTube for history and stuff like that. You won't find any of this information on the Magyar stock because it's been thoroughly wiped out of the Northern Hemisphere. And if Attila Flink hadn't have had the nous and the genius to come across this stuff, and let alone have the life experience to propel him in this direction to research what he experienced, like what I was talking about, Warragamba Dam, where he encountered a tribesman telling him that he was speaking the same language as natives here. So, yeah, it's all very quite interesting, and anyone who knows this information generally becomes a targeted individual if they know it well, and that's what I've experienced as well. So it's important to know this information, and that we have a different past, and that the Garden of Eden, like as I said, comes from here. That's Carrion. That's the whole birthing area.
Oh, with the canal, I have seen.
Yeah.
I've been in that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the whole birthing area for humanity.
Yeah.
And so that's why Carrion there is so important. I reckon it's the original Israel, which is a Turanian Caucasian
Well, it's interesting.
thing.
Yeah.
And it's not just black people that come from Australia. They just basically did that for a polarisation thing versus the British, because the British didn't do the convict thing. It was just an invasion. So,
You okay?
yep, I'm just making sure to see if I'm still in the video.
Yes, you are. Barely.
I think my knees are, or something like that.
Yeah, your head's there.
Oh yeah, oh, that's good.
I can't do it anymore. Sorry. Yeah.
Actually, putting it further back up the hill gets the right around it.
Oh yeah,
There
it
we go.
does actually.
Good going.
Yeah. That's the issue. There we go.
That'll do.
Yep.
Beautiful. Yeah, so
Mm.
I've pretty much said for now all I've got to say. Just a quick video for today, I reckon.
Okay.
Because I can go into more examples, like, say, with words. Look at the suburb called Cronulla. Now, in Magyar, okay, and tribal languages, they don't have double consonants, okay, in the sense of two consonants rubbing up against each other to make a different sound. The language is actually quite strict in how it actually works. It's simple, but it's strict. And all the confused tongue languages do. And here's a perfect example. The suburb Cronulla in Sydney comes from a Magyar word, Kurunula, which means it extends into a circle. So if you were to look at the suburb of Cronulla topographically, it literally extends into a circle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's the same with Ottawa. It
Yeah.
means
Ottawa.
Ottawa means 5 lakes.
That's in New Zealand, right?
No, in Canada.
Oh, Canada. Yeah. Yep.
And because the ut in Hungarian, in Magyar, means 5. Same thing.
Yeah.
And it says 5 lakes. Well, how do they know it's 5 lakes in the Ottawa area? So it just shows that the ancients had a knowledge of astronomy and astrology that was far surpassing our knowledge of where things are at today.
Yeah. Modern day.
In Brisbane, they had what was called the Buck tribe. And Buck means goat in Magyar language.
Yep.
And why is it called goat? Because the astrological configuration, I should say constellation, above Brisbane is Capricorn. So if you wanted to go to Brisbane, you sail to where the Buck tribe is, where Capricorn is. And that's how you basically sail by the stars. It's star maps. Because basically, if you keep the geography pure and you call everything as it's meant to be called, because the geography is a reflection of what's actually happening up there, as above, so below, in that sense. So that's the real true definition of as above, so below, because under each astrological configuration, no constellation and astronomical configuration, you basically have land and seas.
Okay.
And that goes for the whole of space. And so we're not really told the full truth of what's really going on, and whether we're surrounded by air or whether we're surrounded by water or a bit of both, or what's going on.
That's right. Well, I think the ether is, or the firmament, you know, people say there is water. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But I was just going to ask one question.
Yep.
So with the ancient Egyptian connection, I wanted to say, you know how a lot of their temples, I mean, it's not just ancient Egyptians, but they obviously had star knowledge, you know, aligning to certain solstices, like the rotation, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, they definitely had astronomical and astrological significance in their makeup, because it's important, because you've got to know astronomy and astrology to sort of know what's going on in that regard, and to know what's going on here. And another example of a town is out in the Homebush area now in Western Sydney, is where basically the Daruk constellation is, and that's where the Daruk tribe was.
Yeah. In Homebush.
And that means crane. Daruk means crane in Magyar language.
Oh, okay.
And crane's like for very symbolic of imagination. And that's one example there. And then you have mule ranges over Western Australia, and a mule is a rabbit or a hare. And same thing again, there's a rabbit hare constellation above there.
Oh, really?
That indicates the land below.
Okay.
So that this
it's
is
sensical.
Yeah.
It makes
so this is why
sense.
we had the same language everywhere.
Yeah.
And the dialect would be formed by how we could hear each other, whether we were talking in highlands or lowlands or midlands or. And there's a certain mathematical format to how all the dialects work, but there's people out there that just don't want us to know any of this sort of information, and as fascinating as it is, not everyone would find this very fascinating, but consider this: if you control the information that people base their consciousness on, well, then you control their consciousness, do you not?
Yes.
Yeah. And this is and language is all of language. All life is in language.
I agree. Language is very important. Like sound is very important.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep.
And what that sound is, or what it may represent, or what it is. Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Well, yes. Just one last thought. Obviously, the tribal people of Australia had songlines for a reason.
Oh yeah, that's a good one to bring up actually, because the songlines are the root language. They have to be the root language that everyone knows. So the songlines, everyone has to learn them in the same root language for basic communication, common sense, logic.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. So, because that's the thing, because you've got the root Magyar language, and then you've got other dialects. Like, say, for instance, the Welsh Colburn alphabet is the same as Etruscan language, which you reverse Etruscan language and you get Magyar language. You reverse Latin and you get Etruscan. And that's how Latin basically came about, by reversing Etruscan. And Etruscan is pure Welsh language, which is a dialect of Magyar language as well.
Right.
And everyone used to speak all these different dialects of the same Magyar language.
They've just inverted it.
Yeah.
Oh. You know, as a kid, I never really understood English.
Because the Welsh language also extends out to the Aegean, Asia Minor, Turkey.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Palestine.
Helicopter.
Okay, so
Yes.
good place to pause.
It's okay, it's alright. I can cut it out if you want. Yeah, I can cut it out.
That's all right.
It's alright, yeah. Less editing for me.
Yeah, so that's the thing. The whole world used to speak. The Melanesians, the Polynesians, all of the Americas, even all of Europe. You know, France, when it was called Gallian, the Gallians were Magyar. There's so many examples. Like Attila Flink had all the proof, and unfortunately he died without his proof ever seeing the light of day, barely any of it. So I learnt as much as possible to sort of to get the information out, so at least people know. But that's the thing. That's a sad fact. It's come down to this, and it's made me more of a targeted individual than I already am for other sort of reasons. But that's the thing. In my family, I'm of the original core Magyar royalty bloodlines, and the Satanists basically get my bloodline, and they basically do a humiliation program on it, from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime to lifetime.
I think it's a good thing that we're all mixed blood at this stage, because I think that it's so hard to control us when we have all sorts of DNA and genetics that are intermixed, you know. I don't think, I mean, obviously your ancestry is important, but they do use it against us, like you said. Do you know what I mean?
Well, because when you're of the original bloodline of history, or I should say on this story, but when you're of the original bloodline, how these Satanists think is they want to defile you as much as possible. And so, like, say for instance, I got told by a certain contact years ago that the Illuminati used my blood. They sprayed blood on the bomb that set off the late 70s Hilton bombing in Sydney. What was it? I think it was 78 or 79.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah. And basically had my blood splattered on it.
So there was a bombing here?
Yeah.
At the Hilton?
Yeah, it was
on George Street?
Yeah.
That one?
It was a terrorist.
Oh.
A so-called terrorist one, but it was all set up false flag stuff.
I've never heard of that. Okay, yeah. Well, it's funny we're talking about
So
this
what they're always doing is they're always trying to desecrate their opposition, their former opposition, in the sense of most of the bloodline don't even know who they are anymore, and they're scattered all around the world, and they do it in that way. They're not like the original Magyars are not just Hungarians, even though the Hungarians do carry the Magyar legacy, but also like the original Irish, the tribe of Dan, and the Eblate language that they spoke there, that's all Magyar. The thing is that this is how the Satanists think, you know. They're sadistic, and that's why they have all these voice-to-skull electronic gang stalking programs against so many people, because they want to keep people in torture for so long. So that's what it's all about when I talk about the bloodline thing. that's what it's about in that sort of sense. I get what you're saying about the mixed bloodlines, but it's just a little bit of a different thing to what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Because that's why they put me on the ritual altar when I was a young child.
Well, I think a lot of people experience these things etherically, even if they don't experience it in their body, especially sensitive types. But it's interesting how we perceive memory, like our bodies store that. And
Well,
you know, SRA survivors,
Well, the deepest memories are
They don't
stored in the
remember.
spleen. Yeah, well, that's because the deepest, most shocking memories are stored in the spleen, and to get them back out, you've got to do proper centered regression in order to do that.
yeah.
And that's a whole topic for another day.
I think that it's important to note, though, I know what you're saying, but as a species, we have to evolve to a point where it doesn't matter what race, what colour, what blood you are, we're all part of the same.
Oh yeah, but
Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
But you got to know your roots. And the thing is that
I'm not denying that one, yeah.
this is the thing. Yeah, that's all well and given. You know, that's just common sense logic what you're saying there. But no one knows their roots because Magyar itself means great or core or seed, family, Yah, of all peoples. Magyar. AR is like water, like many, many streams. And it all comes from that original family. And most of that information got sort of gutted during the Inquisition. And that's why no one knows about it anymore.
Yeah.
And all this church information is all satanic controlled. And there are Christians in on it, and there are Christians that are not not wise to it. It's all controlled by the Satanists.
There are a lot of truths, though, within, because they're based off
Oh yeah, there's a lot
the
of
truth.
There's a lot of truths, but you've got to get the context right. Otherwise, you'll just be
I
guessing.
know.
You'll be guessing for centuries as to what's going on. It's very cleverly orchestrated because all the Bible has been turned into, and all the other religions and that is a what to believe sort of manual rather than a how to live manual.
I think there are good morals there on how to live. I do.
Oh yeah, but you got to realise that the overall thing is that, you know, God is not some sort of external thing to us. We are all God, and the whole concept of God that's talked about there. And look, they've changed the whole story. Like I said at the beginning, in the original Bible in the Aramaic, they basically got the original Aramaic and they've turned it into Hebrew and English and all other languages, and it's gone through Greek and Latin as well before that. And basically speaking, the Bible has been so distorted in its original meaning. It's like that's the formula for all the Magyar stuff. It's like all the satanic stuff has been taken from it, identity hijacked from the Magyar, and then perverted. So they get the whole, turn it into bipolar duality, and then reverse polarize the duality. Do that, and they twist up the whole story and everything like that. And that's how they've basically invented the whole of Jewish history. You know, not to say that there's not, you know, good people that believe they're Jewish and all that out there, but unfortunately the whole sort of other side of the religion has been sort of hijacked to a completely different thing. And it's used the mechanism of what I just described in the reverse polarising of what was Magyar history is now all this sort of perverted Jewish history that never really was. And it's the Jewish history that controls all the Abrahamic religions. Anyway, I'll stop using the J word now, otherwise I might get censored too much. Shall we stop it here?
Yeah, we can continue another time.
Yeah?
We can. Well, we could probably go more into, because I think you wanted to talk more about the correlation with the dialects you were saying.
Well, you got all these
had some.
you got all these communalex and dialects of the same language that make up all these other so-called other languages within this. They say there's 500, 600 nations here, but that's not the case. It's like it's all these territorial parts of where people are, as according to how I described how places in the geography is sort of named, you know, under the star signs that basically belie them. And, well, sorry, star signs they belie, sorry.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You've got to understand that it's an agglutinative language system. It's got nothing to do with the modern Indo-European language systems. And once you see that, you see how, this is a jigsaw piece, how all the indigenous languages fit in with each other and how it doesn't take them very long to understand each other when they come across each other, you know, from olden times.
Yeah. No, I think you
Because we all spoke the same language essentially.
Yeah.
Like as I said before, dialect. The only thing that affects dialect is the sound of the language over the land that you're in, and also the consciousness of what's controlling the society, as in the politics.
Yep.
And if it's a slave consciousness, well, it's going to have an effect on the language. And that's the thing. And if you control the information source of where people base their consciousness from, and they get rid of all the real history and then replace it, supplant it with a false history that's based on the real history, and they just change the names and characters to make it a big fucking theatre show. Well, unfortunately, that's sort of where we are today.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you guys for the talk.
Oh, perfect. We'll pick up again.
Okay.